the universe has rules, laws of physics that govern matter and energy, constants that define the speed of light, the pull of gravity, the decay of particles. The United Federation of Planets had spent centuries mapping these laws, understanding them, harnessing them to explore strange new worlds and seek out new life and new civilizations. But some things exist beyond the laws any scientist has yet discovered. Space itself screamed. On the bridge of the USS Enterprise D, alarm shrieked as the massive starship shuddered violently. Captain Jean-Luc Picard gripped his command chair, his tea spilling across the armrest as the deck pitched beneath him. "Report," he barked. At the ops console, Lieutenant Commander Data's fingers flew across his panel with inhuman speed. "Massive subspace distortion directly ahead, Captain. Unlike anything in our database. Energy readings are inconsistent with known physics." "Shields up," Commander William Riker ordered from his position beside Picard. "Red alert." The view screen flickered, and what appeared before them defied explanation. A wound in space itself, not a wormhole, not a spatial anomaly, but something that looked like reality had been torn open like fabric. Geometric patterns of impossible colors spiraled within the breach, and arcs of energy that registered as neither matter nor antimatter lashed out into the void. "Captain, the distortion is expanding," Data reported, his golden eyes fixed on his readouts. "At current rate, it will engulf our position in 47 seconds. Evasive maneuvers. Get us clear." At the con, Lieutenant Reginald Barclay's hands trembled as he engaged thrusters. The Enterprise banked hard to starboard, her massive saucer section tilting away from the growing tear in space. But the phenomenon was spreading faster than their impulse engines could compensate. Then, from within the breach, something emerged. Not a ship, a figure, humanoid, tumbling through the void, surrounded by a flickering orange shield of geometric patterns that sparked and sputtered like a failing force field. The figure's limbs flailed, clearly struggling to maintain whatever was protecting them from hard vacuum. "Humanoid life form," Data announced, surprise coloring his usually neutral tone. "Detecting one individual within an energy field of unknown composition. Life signs are reading as human, but the energy signature is extraordinary." Picard leaned forward. In his years exploring the galaxy, he had seen many wonders and many horrors. This was something new. "Can we get a transporter lock?" At the tactical station, Lieutenant Worf's deep voice rumbled with concern. "Attempting, Captain. The energy field surrounding the individual is interfering with our targeting scanners." The figure in space seemed to sense the Enterprise's presence. Through the flickering shield, Picard could make out details now. A human man, wearing strange blue robes and a red cloak that somehow billowed despite the vacuum. The man's hands moved in intricate patterns, and the orange geometric shield flared brighter, stabilizing. Then the man looked directly at the Enterprise's bridge, as if he could see through hull and deck plating to meet Picard's eyes. Behind him, the breach began to collapse. Reality reasserting itself, sealing the wound. "Transporter room 2. Picard called to the ship-wide comm, "Emergency beam out. Lock onto that individual and bring them directly to sickbay. Compensate for the energy field as best you can." "Aye, Captain," came Chief O'Brien's voice, strained with concentration. "I've got him. I think. This is going to be rough." The transporter beam lanced out from the Enterprise, and the figure dematerialized just as the breach sealed completely. Space returned to its normal, ordered state. The impossible colors vanished. The screaming energy dissipated. Silence fell on the bridge, broken only by the soft chirping of consoles. "Sickbay to bridge," came Dr. Beverly Crusher's voice, sharp with urgency. "Jean-Luc, you need to get down here. Now." Picard exchanged a glance with Riker, then rose from his chair. "Number 1, you have the bridge. Maintain yellow alert. Mr. Data, Mr. Worf with me." The turbolift ride to sickbay felt longer than usual. Data stood silently, no doubt running thousands of calculations about what they'd just witnessed. Worf kept one hand near his phaser, his warrior's instincts on full alert. When the doors to sickbay opened, they found controlled chaos. Medical staff moved quickly around a biobed where the stranger lay, still unconscious. Dr. Crusher waved a medical tricorder over him, while Nurse Ogawa prepared a hypospray. But what caught Picard's attention wasn't the man on the biobed. It was what floated above him. A translucent, ghostly version of the same man hovered in midair, sitting cross-legged, watching his own unconscious body with analytical detachment. The apparition glowed with a faint golden light and appeared completely solid despite being clearly not physical. Fascinating, Data breathed. The floating figure turned to regard them, and Picard felt an involuntary chill. The eyes were ancient, carrying a weight of experience that seemed at odds with the man's apparent age of perhaps 40 years. Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Federation Starship Enterprise, the apparition said, its voice echoing strangely, as if coming from a great distance. I apologize for the dramatic entrance. I'm Dr. Stephen Strange, formerly of Earth, though not your Earth, I suspect. And I seem to have a rather significant problem. The ghost gestured at its own unconscious body. My physical form is in shock from the dimensional crossing. My sling ring is damaged. He held up his translucent hands, which trembled slightly. And I appear to be trapped in a universe whose fundamental laws don't quite agree with the magic that's kept me alive for the past decade. The apparition looked directly at Picard, and despite its incorporeal nature, the captain felt the full force of a powerful intellect assessing him. I am a master of the mystic arts, a sorcerer, and if the energy readings I sensed during my arrival are correct, your universe has never encountered anything quite like me. Strange's astral form drifted closer. I need your help to stabilize my condition. In return, I can offer knowledge from beyond your dimension. But I should warn you, the apparition flickered, and for just a moment, Picard saw geometric patterns of energy radiating from Strange's unconscious body, forming mandalas of light that rotated through impossible angles. Where I come from, magic is real, and it just followed me here. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Trek universe, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. Live long and prosper. On the biobed, Dr. Strange's physical body inhaled sharply, his eyes snapping open with pupils that glowed an eerie gold before fading to normal gray. His astral form merged back into his body with a sound like a bell chiming in reverse. He sat up slowly, ignoring Crusher's protests, and looked around sickbay with the careful attention of someone cataloging every detail. When his gaze returned to Picard, he spoke with absolute certainty. Captain, we need to talk. The breach that brought me here? It's not fully closed, and something else might have followed me through. Dr. Crusher moved to push Strange back down onto the biobed, but he caught her wrist with surprising gentleness. I appreciate the concern, Doctor, but I spent years mastering control over my physical form. I'm stable. He released her and swung his legs off the bed, wincing slightly. Relatively speaking. Your readings are anything but stable, Crusher countered, holding up her tricorder. Your neural patterns are unlike anything I've ever seen. There are energy pathways running through your body that don't correspond to any known biological system, and your cellular structure keeps phasing in and out of quantum states. Strange nodded, as if this were perfectly reasonable. That would be the lingering effects of dimensional travel combined with the mystical energy that permeates my body. In my universe, we call it eldritch energy, drawn from other dimensions to power spells and incantations. He stood, steadying himself against the biobed. In yours, it seems to be causing some compatibility issues. Picard stepped forward, his command presence filling the room. Mr. Strange. Dr. Strange, actually. Medical doctor first, master of the mystic art second. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Though I haven't practiced conventional medicine in quite some time. Dr. Strange, Picard continued, his tone measured but firm. You said something followed you through the breach. What kind of threat are we facing? Strange's expression darkened. He raised his right hand, and Picard noticed for the first time the severe trembling in his fingers, the mark of old nerve damage. Despite the shaking, Strange moved his hands through precise, complex gestures. Golden light sparked between his fingers, forming shapes that hurt to look at directly, geometric patterns that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions. Worf's hand went to his phaser. "Captain." "Belay that, Lieutenant," Picard said quietly, though he couldn't take his eyes off the impossible light dancing in Strange's palms. The light coalesced into a sphere, and within it an image formed. A creature of shadow and teeth, writhing with too many limbs, its form constantly shifting, as if it couldn't decide what shape to take in 3-dimensional space. "A dimensional parasite," Strange said, his voice tight with concentration. "They're attracted to breaches between realities. They feed on the energy differential, the friction between universes. Normally, they can't survive in stable dimensional space. But the breach that brought me here." He closed his hand, and the sphere of light vanished. It was open for nearly 30 seconds. More than enough time for something to slip through. Data tilted his head, his positronic brain processing this new information. "Fascinating. You are suggesting that reality itself has cracks, and that creatures can exploit these cracks to travel between what you call dimensions." "Not just suggest. I've spent years guarding the barriers between dimensions on my Earth." Strange's gaze swept the room, taking in the advanced technology with obvious interest. "Your universe is remarkably similar to mine in some ways. Humanoid life, faster than light travel, energy-matter conversion. But there are fundamental differences. The most important being that in my reality, magic and science coexist. Here." He made another gesture, and this time the golden light sputtered, flickering like a candle in wind. "Here, the laws are stricter, more ordered. Magic is difficult." "Magic," Worf said, his tone suggesting he found the entire concept distasteful. "You expect us to believe in superstition and fantasy." Strange turned to face the Klingon, and despite being several inches shorter and far less physically imposing, something in his bearing made him seem larger. "I expect you to believe what your eyes tell you, Lieutenant. What your sensors tell you. I'm standing here, aren't I? Having crossed the void between universes using nothing but mystic arts and my own will." He held up his trembling hands. "These hands were destroyed in a car accident years ago. No surgery could repair them. But magic could. Magic gave me purpose. Magic showed me that the universe, the multiverse, is far stranger and more wondrous than I ever imagined as a neurosurgeon." He turned back to Picard. "In my universe, I protect Earth from mystical threats. Demons, dimensional conquerors, dark gods. I've fought Dormammu of the dark dimension and survived. I've manipulated time itself and bargained with cosmic entities." His voice dropped. "But here I'm weakened. My connection to the sources of my power is strained across dimensional barriers. And if that parasite made it through—" An alarm klaxon shrieked through the ship. "Bridge to Captain Picard," came Riker's urgent voice over the comm. "We're detecting massive power fluctuations in the lower decks. Engineering is reporting." "Sir, this doesn't make sense." "The walls are bleeding shadow." Strange's eyes widened. "It's already hunting." He started for the door, his red cloak swirling behind him despite the lack of any breeze. "Captain, I need to get to wherever that creature manifested. Now." Picard tapped his comm badge. "Number 1, seal off the affected sections. Security teams to Deck 17, but tell them to maintain a safe distance. We're on our way." He looked at Strange. "You'll accompany us, but understand this. You're on my ship, and you'll follow my orders." "Understood." Strange paused at the doorway. "But Captain, your weapons won't work on this thing. Phasers, photon torpedoes, they're all based on principles of energy and matter. This creature exists partially outside your dimensional framework. You'll need me to fight it. Then we'd better hope your magic works better in a combat situation than it did in sickbay," Worf growled. Strange's smile was grim. "Lieutenant, I protected my reality for years with one hand figuratively tied behind my back. Quite literally, sometimes. Being at 75% capacity in an alien dimension." He flexed his fingers, and despite the tremors, Golden sparks danced between them. That's just Tuesday for me. They moved quickly through the corridors, Picard leading with Data and Worf flanking Strange. Crew members pressed themselves against the walls as the group passed, staring at the stranger in the elaborate costume. Strange ignored their looks, his attention focused inward, clearly sensing something the others couldn't. "It's feeding," he muttered, "drawing energy from your ship's power systems to stabilize its form in this dimension. If it gets strong enough, it'll start hunting crew members. They won't just die, they'll be erased from reality. Unmade. How do we stop it?" Picard asked. "In my universe, I'd use the time stone or open a portal to the mirror dimension, trap it there." Strange's jaw clenched. "Here, I'll have to improvise. Sorcery is about willpower and knowledge. I have both. I just need to adapt my techniques to your universe's rules." They reached a turbolift. As the doors closed and the car began its descent, Strange turned to Data. "You're not human. Android? Synthetic life." "I am an android, yes. A positronic brain housed in a biosynthetic body." Strange studied him with intense interest. "Remarkable. In my universe, we have artificial intelligence, but nothing that achieved true consciousness. Your existence alone suggests this reality has different rules about the nature of consciousness and life." He glanced at Worf. "And you're not human either. Klingon." Worf nodded stiffly. "Multiple sentient species, united in a peaceful federation." Strange's expression softened slightly. "We never managed that. Not really. Earth was too busy dealing with enhanced individuals, alien invasions, and the occasional dark god to focus on galactic diplomacy." He looked at Picard. "Your universe might be more optimistic than mine." The turbolift doors opened onto Deck 17. The corridor beyond was dark, emergency lighting casting everything in blood-red shadows. And moving through those shadows was something that didn't belong in any reality. It was larger now than in Strange's conjured image, roughly the size of a shuttlecraft, its form constantly rippling and reforming. Where it touched the walls, the metal corroded and twisted, reality itself seeming to reject the creature's presence. Its multiple eyes, far too many eyes, fixed on the group, and a sound that was not quite a roar and not quite a scream echoed through the corridor. Strange stepped forward, placing himself between the creature and the others. His hands moved through complex patterns, and geometric shields of golden light materialized in the air, forming intricate mandalas that rotated slowly. "All right," he said, his voice steady despite the cosmic horror shambling toward them. "Let's see if the mystic arts translate across realities." The creature lunged. Strange's hands swept upward, and the golden mandalas expanded into a wall of geometric light. The dimensional parasite hit the barrier with tremendous force, and the impact sent shockwaves rippling through the corridor. The shields held, but Strange's face contorted with effort, sweat beading on his forehead. "It's stronger than I thought," he grunted. "It's been feeding on your ship's power grid for," he gasped as the creature slammed against the shields again. "Longer than I estimated." Worf raised his phaser, setting it to maximum. "I thought you said our weapons wouldn't work. They won't kill it, but they might distract it. Fire." The crimson phaser beam lanced through the air, striking the creature dead center. For a moment, the parasite recoiled, its form destabilizing. Then it absorbed the energy, swelling larger, its multiple mouths opening to reveal teeth made of crystallized darkness. "Disruptors might have been better," Worf muttered. Data's eyes were fixed on his tricorder, scanning rapidly. "Dr. Strange, the creature appears to exist in a state of quantum flux. It is simultaneously present and not present in our dimensional space. Fascinating. It operates outside the Heisenberg uncertainty principle." "Less fascination, more solutions, Commander." Strange's shields flickered as another impact rattled them. He was breathing hard now, the tremor in his hands growing more pronounced. "In my universe, I could banish this thing in seconds. Here, the dimensional barriers are too stable. I can't open a portal to anywhere useful." Picard's mind raced. In his years commanding the Enterprise, he had faced the Borg, spatial anomalies that defied physics. But this was something new, a threat that existed outside the rules they understood. What do you need? Time to adapt. And a lot of power. Strange's eyes flicked to Data. Your android said I'm phasing in and out of quantum states. That means my body is still trying to sync with this universe's physical laws. If I can stabilize that synchronization, I can channel more energy without burning myself out. Dr. Crusher to Captain Picard. Came the urgent voice over the comm. We're detecting massive biosign fluctuations from Dr. Strange. Whatever he's doing, his body can't sustain it much longer. I know my limits, Doctor. Strange shouted, though his voice strained with effort. The shields were beginning to crack, fractures of darkness spreading through the golden light like spiderwebs. Data stepped forward. Captain, I may have a solution. Dr. Strange's mystical energy appears to operate on principles similar to subspace field manipulation. If we could create a subspace bubble around him, it might provide the dimensional stability he requires. Strange's eyes widened. Subspace. Yes, that could work. He glanced at Data. Your universe uses subspace for faster-than-light communication and travel. It's an underlying layer of reality. His mind was clearly racing. If I can tap into that framework instead of trying to draw power across dimensional barriers. Geordi, Picard tapped his comm badge. We need a subspace field generator down here. Now, Captain, I can reconfigure a portable force field emitter, came Chief Engineer LaForge's voice. But it'll take me at least 5 minutes. The creature slammed into Strange's shields again, and this time one of the mandalas shattered completely. The parasite's form began squeezing through the gap, its impossible geometry folding in on itself to fit through the opening. We don't have 5 minutes. Worf fired his phaser again, then switched to a wide dispersal beam. The creature barely noticed. Strange's left hand continued maintaining the weakening shields, while his right began tracing new patterns in the air. Then I'll buy us 5 minutes. Captain, get your people back. This is going to get messy. We're not leaving you two. Captain. Strange's voice cracked like a whip, carrying an authority that came from years of command in a different kind of battle. I've fought things that would drive your crew mad just by looking at them. I've died and brought myself back. I've bargained with entities that exist beyond time itself. Trust me, I can handle one overgrown dimensional tick. Picard met Strange's eyes and saw the truth there. This man had fought battles in realms Picard couldn't imagine. Fall back to the next junction. Data, monitor his vitals. They retreated 20 meters down the corridor. Strange stood alone, his red cloak billowing as if caught in a wind that didn't exist, his hands moving through increasingly complex gestures. The golden light around him intensified, and geometric patterns began forming in the air, not just circles and triangles, but shapes that seemed to exist in 4 dimensions, 5, folding through angles that human eyes weren't meant to perceive. By the Vishanti, hear me, Strange intoned, his voice resonating with power that made the deck plates vibrate. By the bands of Sidorak, by the crimson bands of, he faltered. No, those spells draw from entities that don't exist here. I need to adapt. I need to. His hands stilled for a moment. Then he began again, this time speaking not in incantations, but in what sounded like mathematical formulae mixed with Sanskrit. Data's tricorder was going wild. Captain, I am detecting massive fluctuations in local spacetime. Dr. Strange is somehow manipulating the quantum foam, the underlying structure of reality itself. The parasite had forced its way fully through the shields now, and it lunged at Strange. He didn't move. Instead, he brought his hands together in a thunderous clap, and a shockwave of golden energy exploded outward. The creature stopped mid-lunge, suspended in midair. Strange's hands moved outward slowly, and as they did, the space around the parasite began to fold. Not bend, fold, like origami, dimensions layering over dimensions in a way that made Picard's eyes water to watch. I'm creating a pocket dimension, Strange said through gritted teeth, his whole body trembling now. Just a small one. A bubble of space-time isolated from your universe. It won't last long, but... The creature thrashed, fighting against the dimensional prison forming around it. One of its limbs broke free, lashing out and catching Strange across the chest. His protective shield absorbed most of the impact, but he staggered back, blood trickling from his nose. Almost there, Geordi LaForge burst around the corner, carrying a modified force field emitter. "Captain, I've got it." "Activate it," Picard ordered. Geordi thumbed the controls, and a bubble of shimmering energy enveloped Strange. The sorcerer gasped as the subspace field stabilized around him, and suddenly the golden light around his hands blazed 10 times brighter. "That's more like it," Strange breathed. His hands moved faster now, weaving patterns of light that formed a spherical cage around the dimensional parasite. The creature screamed, its form destabilizing, becoming less solid. "In my universe, I'd banish you back to the space between spaces. Here, I'll settle for putting you somewhere you can't hurt anyone." With a final, definitive gesture, Strange clenched his fists. The pocket dimension sealed with an audible crack, and the parasite vanished. All that remained was a faintly glowing sphere of golden light, about the size of a baseball, floating in the air where the creature had been. Strange caught it in one hand, and Picard could see the effort it took to hold the sealed dimension stable. "This won't last forever. The pocket dimension will decay in approximately 72 hours. By then, I'll need to have figured out a more permanent solution." He walked toward the group, and Picard could see the toll the battle had taken. Strange's face was pale, his movements careful and measured. But his eyes were sharp, calculating, already thinking several steps ahead. "Your subspace field stabilizer," Strange said to Geordi. "It worked. It gave me something to anchor my spells to, a framework that exists within your universe's natural laws." He looked at the engineer with newfound respect. "You essentially gave me a bridge between magic and science." Geordi's visor swept over Strange, analyzing. "The energy patterns you're generating, they're similar to what we see in spatial anomalies and subspace tears. But you're controlling them with just your hands? Your mind." "Will and knowledge," Strange corrected. "Magic isn't just hand-waving and mystical words, though those help focus the mind. It's about understanding the fundamental nature of reality and having the willpower to reshape it. In my universe, we call it the mystic arts. Here, you'd probably classify it as advanced quantum manipulation combined with directed subspace field generation." Data was still scanning his expression, or lack thereof, somehow conveying intense curiosity. "Dr. Strange, I would very much like to study your abilities further. The implications for our understanding of physics are staggering." "I'd like that too, Commander." Strange swayed slightly, and Picard moved to steady him. "But first, I need to rest. Creating a pocket dimension while working at partial capacity has taxed me." "Sickbay," Picard ordered. "And this time, Doctor, you'll stay put until Beverly clears you." Strange didn't argue, which told Picard exactly how exhausted he truly was. As they made their way back to the turbolift, Strange looked at the glowing sphere in his hand. "Captain, we need to talk about the breach that brought me here. I sealed off that dimensional parasite, but if the rift isn't fully closed, other things could come through. Worse things. Then we'll deal with them," Picard said firmly. "Together." Strange managed a tired smile. "You know, in my universe, I'm used to being the most knowledgeable person in the room about mystical threats. Here, I'm the threat nobody understands." He glanced around at Picard, Data, Worf, and Geordi. "It's humbling, and strangely refreshing." The turbolift doors closed, and as they ascended, Picard found himself reassessing everything he thought he knew about the nature of reality. Magic was real, and it had just saved his ship. The Enterprise glided through space at impulse speed, her sensors sweeping continuously for any further dimensional anomalies. In sickbay, Dr. Strange sat on a biobed, while Beverly Crusher ran every scan she could think of. The results grew more perplexing with each pass of her medical tricorder. "Your neural pathways are still fluctuating," she said, frowning at her readouts. "But they're beginning to stabilize into a pattern. It's as if your body is learning to exist in our universe." "Adaptation," Strange replied, examining the glowing sphere he'd sealed the dimensional parasite in. The human body is remarkably resilient, even when subjected to impossible conditions. I've trained mine to withstand dimensional travel, temporal manipulation, and exposure to eldritch entities. This is just one more adjustment. Crusher set down her tricorder and fixed him with a look that physicians across universes seem to master. You speak about these things so casually. Dimensional travel, temporal manipulation. Where I come from, those are theoretical concepts that would require a starship and a crew of hundreds to even attempt. Where I come from, a trained sorcerer with a sling ring can open a portal to anywhere on Earth in seconds. Strange held up his damaged sling ring, a brass device on 2 fingers, cracked and dark where it should have glowed. Unfortunately, mine didn't survive the trip intact. And even if it had, I'm not sure it would work here. The spatial coordinates, the dimensional anchors, everything's different. The sickbay doors opened, and Picard entered with Data and a man Strange hadn't met yet. He was tall and slender, with dark skin and a distinctive visor over his eyes, a technological device that seemed to grant vision through other means. "Dr. Strange," Picard began, "I'd like you to meet Lieutenant Commander Geordi LaForge, our chief engineer. He's been analyzing the subspace field generator that stabilized your abilities." Geordi stepped forward, his visor tilting as it scanned Strange. "It's fascinating. When we activated the subspace field around you, your energy output increased by 370%. It's like you were trying to draw power through a straw, and we gave you a fire hose." Strange nodded slowly. "That's an apt metaphor. In my universe, there are ambient mystical energies, ley lines, dimensional confluences, places where the barriers between realities are thin. Sorcerers tap into those energies to power our spells. Here, those energies don't exist, or they exist in a fundamentally different form. But subspace." He smiled. "Subspace might be this universe's equivalent, an underlying layer of reality that I can draw from." Data's head tilted with interest. "You are suggesting that what you call magic is simply manipulation of dimensional energies that exist naturally in your universe, and that by adapting your techniques to manipulate subspace energy in ours, you can achieve similar effects." "Exactly." Strange stood, ignoring Crusher's protest. "Magic and science aren't opposites. They're 2 different languages describing the same underlying truths about reality. Your technology manipulates matter and energy according to natural laws. My magic manipulates those same laws, but from a different angle, by accessing the spaces between the quantum foam, the flexible edges of reality where rules can be bent." "That's a dangerous philosophy," came a new voice from the doorway. Everyone turned to see a being of pure energy materialize in sickbay, humanoid in shape, dressed in what appeared to be a Starfleet captain's uniform from a century past, but radiating power that made the lights flicker. His face wore an expression of theatrical amusement. "Q," Picard said, his voice carrying equal parts exasperation and wariness. "What do you want?" The entity called Q ignored Picard entirely, his attention fixed on Strange. He walked, or appeared to walk, around the sorcerer, examining him like a curious cat studying a new specimen. "Well, well, well. What have we here? A reality bender from beyond the veil. A mortal who's learned to play with forces that should be far beyond his ken." Q's smile widened. "And he's broken. How delicious." Strange met Q's gaze without flinching. "You're not human. Not even close. Omnipotent? Or just extremely powerful?" "Omnipotent, thank you very much." Q snapped his fingers, and suddenly Strange found himself dressed in a medieval jester's outfit, complete with bells. "See? I can manipulate reality with a thought. While you..." He gestured dismissively, and Strange's normal attire returned. "You have to wave your hands around and mutter mystical nonsense. Very theatrical, but ultimately limited." "Q, if you've come to torment us, I'm in no mood," Picard said sharply. "Torment? Mon Capitaine, I'm hurt." Q placed a hand over his heart in mock offense. "I'm here because something unprecedented just happened." A being from another universe, not another dimension, not another reality, but a completely separate universal structure, has crossed over into ours. The Q continuum is very interested in this development. Strange expression hardened. The Q continuum, a collective of omnipotent beings who exist outside normal spacetime. I've encountered similar entities in my universe, the living tribunal, the celestials, the Vishanti. Beings who operate on a cosmic scale. He took a step toward Q, and to Picard's surprise, the omnipotent being didn't move back. If your continuum has a problem with my presence, they can take it up with me directly. I've bargained with cosmic entities before. Q's eyebrows rose. Oh, he's got fire, this one. I like that. He circled Strange again. The continuum doesn't have a problem with you, Dr. Strange. We're curious. You see, the barriers between what you call universes and what we know to be discrete universal structures are supposed to be impermeable. Yet here you are, living proof that these barriers can be breached. He leaned in close. The question is, was it an accident, or is something deliberately punching holes in reality? The temperature in sickbay seemed to drop. Strange's hands began moving unconsciously through defensive patterns, golden light flickering at his fingertips. What are you saying? I'm saying that the breach that brought you here? It wasn't random quantum fluctuation. It was caused. Q's theatrical demeanor faded, replaced by something that might have been genuine concern. Something or someone wanted you here, or wanted the barriers between universes weakened, and that, my magically inclined friend, should terrify you as much as it intrigues the continuum. Data's positronic brain was processing at maximum capacity. Q, are you suggesting that an entity exists which is capable of manipulating the structure of multiple universes simultaneously? I'm not suggesting anything, you electronic encyclopedia. I'm telling you. And whatever this entity is, it's powerful enough that even the Q continuum is paying attention. Q turned back to Picard, which means, Jean-Luc, that your little ship and your new magical passenger are now at the center of something that could reshape the very nature of existence itself. That's comforting, Picard said dryly. Strange had gone very still, his mind clearly racing through implications. In my universe, there are entities that exist beyond the multiverse itself. The living tribunal maintains balance across all realities. The one above all observes from beyond comprehension. If something is punching holes between universal structures. He looked at Q with new respect and new fear. You're right. That should terrify me. Finally, someone who understands the gravity of the situation. Q threw his hands up. See, Jean-Luc? This is why I keep trying to expand your limited human perspective. The universe is far stranger than you imagine. We know, Q, Picard said with infinite patience. You remind us every time you appear. Q materialized a comfortable chair and sat down. Here's what the continuum has observed. 3 days ago, by your linear time measurement, there was a cascade of dimensional instabilities across multiple universal structures. Small tiers quickly sealed, but numerous. Then 2 days ago, a major breach formed, the one that pulled our friend here through. And, as of this morning, we've detected 17 more minor breaches attempting to form. Geordi's visor swept toward Q. 17? You're saying reality itself is destabilizing. Not destabilizing. Being deliberately weakened. Someone is testing the barriers, probing for weaknesses. Q stood and snapped his fingers. A holographic display appeared in the air, showing what looked like a web of glowing lines connecting numerous points. This is a simplified representation of the universal structure. Your universe, Strange Universe, and approximately 47,000 others we're aware of. Each line represents the barrier between universal structures. See these dark spots? The hologram zoomed in on several locations where the glowing lines had dimmed or cracked. These are the breach points. And they're all concentrated around the same nexus. Right here, in this sector of your galaxy, Captain. Strange moved closer to the hologram, his fingers unconsciously tracing patterns in the air as he analyzed the display. A nexus. Of course. In my universe, Certain locations serve as focal points for mystical energy. New York's Sanctum Sanctorum Kamartaj in Nepal, the Hong Kong Sanctum. If there are universal nexus points. He turned to Picard. Captain, we need to find the exact location of this nexus. If something is using it to weaken the barriers between universes, we need to know why. And who? Worf added grimly. Q's smile returned, but it had a sharp edge. Now you're asking the right questions. Who would have the power to manipulate universal barriers? Who would have the motivation? And most importantly, he looked directly at Strange. Why would they want you specifically to end up in this universe? Strange's face paled slightly. You think I'm not a random arrival. You think I was deliberately pulled here. Think about it, Doctor. You're a master of the mystic arts. You protect your reality from dimensional threats. If someone wanted to weaken the barriers between universes, you'd be one of the first obstacles they'd need to remove from your universe. Q's expression turned serious. By pulling you here, they accomplish two goals. They eliminate a defender from your reality, and they place you in a universe where your powers are significantly weakened. The implications hung in the air like a physical weight. Picard felt the familiar sensation of being drawn into something far larger than he'd initially understood. Q, if what you're saying is true, then Strange's arrival isn't just a curiosity. It's a tactical maneuver in some larger conflict. Finally catching on, Jean-Luc. I'm so proud. Q began to fade. The Continuum will be watching with great interest. Try not to break reality too badly while you fumble around investigating. And Dr. Strange. Q's voice echoed as his form dissipated. Welcome to a universe where the rules are different. Let's see if you can adapt before whatever pulled you here makes its next move. The entity vanished completely, leaving behind only the faint scent of ozone and a room full of troubled faces. Strange broke the silence. Captain, I need access to your ship's sensors and stellar cartography. If there's a universal nexus in this sector, I should be able to detect it using a combination of your subspace sensors and my mystical perception. Agreed. Picard tapped his comm badge. Bridge, set course for stellar cartography. Commander Data, I want continuous scans for any spatial or subspace anomalies. And bring us to yellow alert. As the crew moved to carry out his orders, Picard found himself studying Strange. The man carried himself with the confidence of someone who'd faced cosmic threats before, but there was something else, a weight of responsibility that Picard recognized all too well. Dr. Strange, you mentioned you were a protector of your reality. What does that entail? Strange's expression grew distant. I guard one of 3 sanctums on Earth that protect our dimension from mystical invasion. I've fought demons, dark gods, and beings that exist beyond time. I've seen the end of everything and found ways to prevent it. He met Picard's eyes. But I've always had the resources of my universe behind me, the mystical artifacts, the dimensional energies, the support of other sorcerers. Here, I'm alone, weakened, and apparently at the center of a threat that spans multiple universes. You're not alone, Picard said firmly. You have the Enterprise and her crew. We may not understand magic, but we understand duty. We understand the need to protect others from threats they cannot comprehend. A ghost of a smile crossed Strange's face. Thank you, Captain. Though I should warn you, in my experience, threats that span multiple universes tend to require solutions that are unconventional. Unconventional is becoming our specialty, Picard replied. Now let's find this nexus and determine what we're truly facing. The Stellar Cartography Bay was a cathedral of stars. Holographic projections filled the spherical room, displaying the local sector in 3-dimensional detail. Strange stood on the central platform, surrounded by glowing representations of star systems, nebulae, and spatial phenomena. His head tilted back as he absorbed the cosmic geography. Incredible, he breathed. In my universe, we have similar technology, but nothing this sophisticated. This is like standing in the mind of the galaxy itself. Data worked at a console, his fingers moving with inhuman precision. I have isolated all spatial anomalies, subspace distortions, and quantum irregularities within a 50 light-year radius. There are 147 such phenomena. Shall I filter the results? Not yet. Strange's hands began moving through patterns, and golden light traced geometric shapes in the air around him. The shapes rotated slowly, overlaying the holographic star chart with mystical diagrams that seemed to respond to the positions of stars and anomalies. In my universe, magical nexus points align with certain astronomical configurations. Ley lines follow patterns that correspond to planetary positions, stellar arrangements, gravitational wells. Geordi watched from his position at another console, his visor tracking the interaction between strange magic and the Enterprise's technology. That's actually not that different from subspace mechanics. Subspace fields are stronger near gravitational sources. Communication relays have to account for stellar positioning. Exactly. Strange's hands moved faster, adding more layers to his mystical overlay. Magic and science, two languages, same underlying principles. Data, highlight any location where 3 or more anomalies intersect. The star chart shifted, and suddenly only 12 points remained illuminated. Strange studied them, his brow furrowed in concentration. Now cross-reference those with any historical records of unexplained phenomena. Temporal anomalies, spatial distortions, missing ships, unusual sensor readings. Data's golden eyes flickered as he processed centuries of Starfleet records. 4 of the 12 locations have histories of unusual activity. However, one location stands out significantly. The holographic display zoomed in on a binary star system. The Tyrellius system. 7 documented incidents of missing vessels over the past 90 years. Multiple reports of temporal displacement. And 3 separate instances of what Starfleet classified as dimensional echoes, brief sensor contacts with vessels that could not possibly exist in our timeline. Strange's hands stopped moving. Dimensional echoes. That's it. That's where the nexus is. He turned to Picard, who had been observing quietly. Captain, I need to go there. If that's the focal point where someone is punching holes between universes, I might be able to determine who's responsible and how to stop them. The Tyrellius system is in disputed territory, Worf said from his station. The Romulan Star Empire claims it falls within their sphere of influence, though no formal borders have been established in that sector. Of course it is, Picard muttered. Nothing is ever simple. He considered for a moment. Set course for the Tyrellius system, Warp 6. Lieutenant Worf, prepare a probe for advanced reconnaissance. If the Romulans are monitoring the system, I'd prefer to know before we arrive. As the ship changed course, Strange continued studying the star charts, but Picard noticed his hands were trembling more than usual. Doctor, are you well? I'm maintaining the pocket dimension containing that parasitic creature, Strange admitted. It requires constant concentration to keep it stable. And adapting my abilities to work with your universe's physics is taxing. But I'll manage. Beverly Crusher's voice came over the comm, Dr. Strange. Your biosigns are showing increased strain. You need rest. I'll rest when we've secured the nexus and determined the threat level. Strange's tone was polite but firm. In my line of work, you learn to function while exhausted. I once maintained a time loop for what felt like centuries to defeat a dimensional conqueror. This is manageable. Data tilted his head. Centuries? That would be psychologically damaging for most humans. Most humans aren't trained in meditation techniques that span multiple mystical traditions. Strange smiled slightly. Though yes, it was unpleasant. But it saved Earth. Sometimes the cost is worth paying. Picard recognized that mindset. He'd made similar choices, borne similar burdens. Commander Data, how long until we reach the Tyrellius system? At current speed, 3 hours and 42 minutes. Good. Dr. Strange, I'm ordering you to rest until we arrive. That's not a request. Strange looked like he might argue, then nodded. I'll meditate in my quarters. It's not exactly rest, but it'll help me maintain focus. He gestured at the glowing sphere he still carried. I'll need to take this with me. The pocket dimension needs my attention. Understood. I'll have security escort you. As Strange departed, Geordi moved to stand beside Picard. Captain, I've been analyzing the energy readings from when Strange fought that creature. His magic generates massive amounts of energy from seemingly nowhere. If we could understand the mechanism, the applications would be revolutionary. I suspect Dr. Strange's abilities aren't easily replicated, Commander. They seem to require years of training and a fundamental change in how one perceives reality. Maybe. But even understanding the principles could help us develop new technologies. Geordi's enthusiasm was evident. He's manipulating quantum states, creating pocket dimensions, drawing energy from subspace, or whatever passes for subspace in his universe. It's like he's a living warp core. Data looked up from his console. An interesting analogy, Geordi. Though I would suggest Dr. Strange is more analogous to a biological computer interfacing directly with the underlying code of reality. Both of you are anthropomorphizing what I do, came Strange's voice from the doorway. He'd paused before leaving. It's not technology. It's not programming. It's will imposed on reality through understanding and discipline. You're trying to reduce it to mechanisms you can measure and replicate. Some things. He smiled slightly. Some things are meant to remain mysterious. After he left, Picard turned back to the star chart, studying the Tyrellia system. Something about this situation bothered him. Q rarely appeared without reason, and his warning about deliberate universal manipulation suggested a threat of unprecedented scale. Captain, Data said, interrupting his thoughts. I have completed a more detailed analysis of the Tyrellia system. There is something unusual about the binary stars themselves. The hologram zoomed in, showing two stars locked in close orbit, one blue-white, one red. The spectral analysis indicates these stars should not exist in their current configuration. The red giant should have consumed the companion star millions of years ago. Yet both remain stable, locked in an orbit that defies conventional stellar mechanics. Worf leaned forward. Could they be artificially maintained? It would require technology far beyond anything we possess, Data replied. The energy expenditure alone would be staggering. However, he paused, an unusual behavior for the android. There is another possibility. If this is indeed a universal nexus, the exotic physics at play might naturally stabilize the system in a configuration that would normally be impossible. Picard felt a chill. You're suggesting the nexus itself has warped local physics. What happens when someone starts deliberately manipulating that nexus? Unknown, Captain. But the potential consequences could extend far beyond this star system. The comm chimed. Bridge to Captain Picard. We're receiving a transmission. Picard exchanged glances with his officers. Put it through. The stellar cartography display flickered, replaced by a face that made Worf growl instinctively. A Romulan commander appeared, her expression cold and calculating. Captain Picard of the Enterprise. I am Commander Sela of the Romulan warbird Valdor. You are approaching a system of strategic importance to the Romulan Star Empire. State your intentions. Picard kept his expression neutral. Commander Sela, we're conducting scientific research on spatial phenomena in this sector. We have no hostile intent. Sela's eyes narrowed. Scientific research. How convenient. Our sensors detected unusual energy signatures emanating from your vessel approximately 2 hours ago. Energy signatures that match reports of recent spatial disturbances throughout this sector. She leaned forward. What have you found, Picard? Before Picard could respond, the transmission disrupted. Not with static or interference, but with something else. Geometric patterns of golden light that flickered across the screen, growing more intense. Sela's image fragmented, her voice distorting. What is? All ships, shields up. We're detecting. The transmission cut completely. In its place, the stellar cartography display showed real-time sensor data from the Tyrellia system. And what it showed made Picard's blood run cold. A massive tear in space had opened between the binary stars. Not a wormhole, not a spatial rift. This was something far worse, a wound in reality itself, growing larger by the second. Through it, they could see other places, other times, fragments of different universes bleeding through. "Captain," came Riker's urgent voice from the bridge. "We're detecting multiple vessels in the Tyrellia system. 3 Romulan warbuds, 2 vessels of unknown configuration, and a pause. Sir, one of those unknown vessels is reading as identical to the Enterprise, down to the hull markings." Data's fingers flew across his console. "Captain, I am detecting our own warp signature emanating from that vessel. According to sensors, it is the Enterprise. But we are here." Red alert. Picard was already moving toward the door. "All hands to battle stations. Get Dr. Strange to the bridge. Now." As klaxons wailed through the ship, Picard ran through corridors toward the bridge, his mind racing. Another Enterprise. Dimensional echoes. The Nexus was opening, and something was coming through. Or perhaps something had already arrived. The turbolift doors opened onto controlled chaos. Riker stood at the center of the bridge, coordinating reports. "Captain, we're 90 seconds from the system. The spatial tear is expanding exponentially. And whatever those ships are doing, they're making it worse." On the view screen, the impossible sight continued to unfold. The tier between universes pulsed with sickly light, and through it, they could see dozens of different realities. Enterprises from other timelines, Romulan ships that looked both familiar and wrong, and something else. Something massive moving in the depths of the dimensional rift. The turbolift opened again, and Strange stumbled out, his face pale. "I felt it. The Nexus is collapsing. Someone's forcing it open from both sides." He looked at the view screen, and his expression turned grim. "Captain, we need to close that rift. Now. Because if what I'm sensing is correct, what's trying to come through isn't from any single universe." "What is it?" Picard demanded. Strange's hands were already moving through protective gestures, golden shields forming around himself. Something that exists between universes. Something that feeds on the barriers themselves. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "In my universe, we have a name for entities like this. We call them incursions, reality eaters that consume the boundaries between worlds." "Captain," Worf reported, his voice tense. "The Romulan vessels are charging weapons. They're targeting the dimensional rift." "Belay that thought," Strange shouted. "If they fire energy weapons into an unstable dimensional breach, they'll destabilize it completely. The rift will expand to consume this entire sector." Picard made his decision in an instant. Open a channel to the Romulan flagship. All frequencies. The view screen split, showing both the expanding rift and Commander Sila's face. Behind her, her bridge was in chaos. "Picard, what is this? What have you done?" "We didn't do this, Commander. But we can stop it. Stand down your weapons and listen very carefully. You're about to fire on something that will kill us all if you hit it." For a long moment, Sila stared at him. Then at the rift. Then at Strange, who had moved to stand beside Picard. "Who is that?" "Someone with expertise in dimensional phenomena. Commander, this is bigger than Federation Romulan politics. This is a threat to reality itself. Will you work with us, or will you destroy us all?" Sila's jaw clenched. Then, slowly, she nodded. "My weapons are yours to command, Picard. For now. But when this is over, we will have words about Federation ships in Romulan space." "Agreed." Picard turned to Strange. "Doctor, what do we do?" Strange's eyes were fixed on the rift, and for the first time since arriving, Picard saw genuine fear in them. "We close it, from the inside, and pray that whatever's trying to come through hasn't already crossed over." The bridge of the Enterprise had never felt smaller. Strange stood at the center, his hands weaving patterns of golden light that formed a three-dimensional map of the dimensional rift. Data and Geordi flanked him, tricorders scanning constantly, trying to translate mystical phenomena into scientific data. "The rift has 17 primary fracture points," Strange said, his voice strained with concentration. "Each one is a connection between this universe and another. But they're not random. His fingers traced lines through the holographic display. They form a pattern, a deliberate structure. Data's head tilted as he analyzed the pattern. It resembles a hexadecimal matrix, the kind used in advanced computational systems. Or a mystical summoning circle, Strange countered. In my universe, complex spells require geometric precision. This, he gestured at the rift. This is a spell on a cosmic scale. Someone is using the universal nexus as a focal point to create a permanent bridge between realities. To what end? Picard asked. Invasion, escape, power. Strange's expression darkened. Or something worse. If you wanted to collapse the barriers between all universes, creating a singular unified reality under your control, this would be step one. The view screen showed the Romulan warbuds maintaining position around the rift, weapons powered but not firing. Commander Sila's face appeared in a communication window. Picard, my science officer, reports the spatial tear is growing at an exponential rate. In 37 minutes, it will reach critical mass. After that, containment will be impossible. We're aware, Commander. Picard turned to Strange. 37 minutes. Can you close it in that time? Strange's hands trembled visibly now. The strain of maintaining both the pocket dimension with the captured parasite and analyzing the massive rift taking its toll. Alone? No. But if I had help. He looked at Geordi. Commander LaForge, could you modify your subspace field generator to create multiple synchronized fields? Geordi's visor swept over the holographic display. Maybe. If I linked them to the ship's deflector array, I could project a subspace containment field around the rift. But I need precise coordinates for each fracture point. I can provide those. Strange's hands moved faster, golden markers appearing at 17 points around the rift. But there's a problem. To close a rift this large, I'll need to physically enter it, navigate to each fracture point, and seal them from inside the dimensional boundary. Worf's voice was a low growl. That would be suicide. Probably, Strange agreed calmly. The space between universes isn't meant for living beings. The dimensional friction alone would tear apart anyone without mystical protection. And even with it, he met Picard's eyes. I'll be operating at maybe 50% capacity inside that chaos. No guarantees I make it back. Unacceptable, Picard said flatly. There must be another way. Captain, with respect, I've spent years protecting my reality from dimensional threats. This is what I do. Strange's voice carried absolute conviction. In my universe, I've died before. I bargained with a being of pure destruction in a time loop that lasted subjective centuries. I've seen the end of everything and found the will to continue. If this is what's required to protect two universes from collapsing into each other. He straightened despite his obvious exhaustion. Then it's what I'll do. Riker stepped forward. What if you had backup? Someone to watch your back while you work? Strange shook his head. Commander, no offense, but your people aren't equipped for dimensional travel. The energies inside that rift would kill you in seconds. What about me? Data asked quietly. Everyone turned to look at the android. He stood motionless, his golden eyes reflecting the swirling colors of the dimensional rift on the view screen. I am not biological, Data continued. I do not exist in the same quantum states as organic life. The dimensional friction that would destroy a living being might have significantly less effect on my positronic matrix. Strange studied Data with new intensity. You're right. You're not alive in the traditional sense. No offense intended. None taken. Your consciousness exists as electromagnetic patterns in an artificial substrate. Dimensional boundaries affect matter and energy, but information... Strange's eyes widened. Information can exist independently of the medium that carries it. Data, you might actually survive inside the rift longer than I would. Geordi stepped closer to his friend. Data, we don't know what would happen to you in there. Your positronic brain might be immune to dimensional friction, but what about the rest of you? Your body, your sensory systems? Unknown, Data admitted. However, The probability of mission success increases significantly with 2 operatives instead of 1. Logic dictates that I should accompany Dr. Strange. Picard weighed the options. Sending his second officer and a visitor from another universe into a dimensional rift that might kill them both went against every command instinct he possessed. But the alternative was watching the rift consume this entire sector, possibly more. Very well, but I'm not sending you in blind. He tapped his comm badge. Bridge to engineering. Mr. LaForge, I need you to prepare 2 modified environment suits with integrated subspace field generators and rig them with emergency transport enhancers tied to the ship's transporter system. If things go wrong, I want the ability to pull them out. Aye, Captain. Give me 20 minutes. Strange nodded approval. Good thinking. Though I should warn you, transporters might not work properly inside the rift. The dimensional instability could scatter our patterns across multiple realities. Then we'd better close this thing quickly, Data said. As Geordi rushed off to engineering, Strange turned to study the view screen more carefully. The rift pulsed with sickly light, and through it, glimpses of other universes flickered past. In one, they saw a Klingon empire that had conquered the Federation. In another, Earth was a barren wasteland. In a third, the Enterprise hung in space, but its hull was organic, grown rather than built. Infinite diversity in infinite combinations, Strange murmured, echoing a Vulcan philosophy. Every choice, every quantum possibility, creates a new branch of reality. Your universe, my universe, millions of others, all separated by barriers that were never meant to be crossed. He turned to Picard. Captain, I need you to understand something. If we fail to close this rift, the consequences won't just be destruction. It'll be unification. All these realities bleeding into each other, becoming one chaotic mess where the laws of physics change from moment to moment. A cosmos where nothing can exist because existence itself has no stable definition. Then we won't fail, Picard said simply. The comm chimed. Sela to Enterprise. Picard, we're detecting movement inside the rift. Something large. The view screen zoomed in on the rift center. Through the swirling, dimensional chaos, a shape was emerging. It was massive, easily the size of a Galaxy-class starship, but its form was wrong. Geometry that couldn't exist in 3 dimensions. Surfaces that reflected light from sources that weren't there. And eyes. Dozens of eyes, scattered across its impossible surface, each one staring in a different direction, seeing into different realities simultaneously. The incursion, Strange whispered. It's already crossing over. The entity's presence seemed to make reality itself recoil. Space warped around it, stars flickering in and out of existence. The Enterprise's sensors went haywire, reporting contradictory data. The entity was both solid and intangible, hot and cold, moving toward them and away from them simultaneously. Worf's tactical display lit up with weapons locks, but his voice carried uncertainty. Captain, targeting systems cannot acquire a lock. The entity exists in too many spatial coordinates at once. Do not fire, Strange ordered, his hands already moving through defensive patterns. Golden shields began forming around the Enterprise. Weapons will just feed it. The incursion consumes energy, all forms of energy. Every phaser blast, every photon torpedo would just make it stronger. Then how do we fight it? Riker demanded. We don't. We starve it. Strange shields expanded, now encompassing the entire ship in a sphere of geometric light. The incursion feeds on the dimensional friction created by the rift. Close the rift, and it loses its food source. It'll be forced back into the space between universes where it belongs. On the view screen, the entity had fully emerged from a rift. It turned, or something that might have been turning in dimensions humans couldn't perceive, and its many eyes focused on the Enterprise. Then it screamed. The sound wasn't audio. It was reality itself shuddering, protesting the entity's existence. Every crew member on the bridge clutched their heads as the scream bypassed their ears and resonated directly in their minds. Data stood unaffected, his artificial nature protecting him, while Strange weathered the assault through sheer force of will. "It knows we're a threat," Strange gasped. "It's going to try to stop us before we can close the rift." The incursion moved, and movement was the wrong word for what it did. It simply existed closer to the Enterprise than it had a moment before, without crossing the space between. Its surface rippled, and tendrils of impossible geometry reached out toward the ship. Strange shields flared as the tendrils struck them. "Captain, get us away from that thing. Now." "Evasive maneuvers," Picard ordered. "Maximum impulse." The Enterprise banked hard, but the incursion matched their movement effortlessly. More tendrils lashed out, and Strange shields buckled under the assault. Golden light cracked and shattered, forcing Strange to his knees from the feedback. "Romulan vessels are firing on the entity," Worf reported. "No effect. Their disruptor beams are being absorbed. Tell them to stop." Strange shouted. "They're feeding it." But it was too late. The incursion had grown visibly larger, fed by the Romulan weapons' fire. It turned a portion of its attention toward the warbuds, and one of them simply ceased to exist. No explosion, no debris. The ship was there one moment, erased from reality the next. Commander Sela's face appeared on screen, her composure finally cracking. "Picard, what is that thing?" "Something that shouldn't exist in our universe," Picard replied. "Hold your fire and give us time to work." La Forge to bridge. "Captain, the environment suits are ready. But sir, I'm not sure they'll be enough. The energy readings from that rift are off the scale." Strange forced himself to his feet, blood trickling from his nose. "They'll have to be enough. Data and I are going in." Picard wanted to argue, wanted to find another solution. But there was none. Transporter room. Prepare to beam Commander Data and Dr. Strange to the coordinates they provide. Stand by. Strange looked at the view screen one more time, at the incursion hovering in space like a cancer on reality, at the rift behind it pulsing with the light of 1,000 dying universes. His hands steadied despite their tremor, and his voice carried the weight of someone who had faced impossible odds before. "In my universe, there's an oath we sorcerers take. We swear to protect our reality from mystical threats, to stand between humanity and the darkness, to give everything, including our lives, to maintain the barriers that keep existence stable." He turned to Picard. "I didn't think I'd be honoring that oath in a different universe. But duty doesn't stop at dimensional boundaries." "Then let's hope duty is enough," Picard said. "Mr. Data, Dr. Strange, good luck. The fate of 2 universes rests in your hands." Data and Strange moved toward the turbolift. As the doors closed, Data spoke one last time. "Captain, if we do not return, please inform Geordi that our friendship has been one of the most enriching experiences of my existence." Then they were gone, descending toward engineering and a mission that might very well be their last. On the view screen, the incursion continued to grow, and reality continued to scream. Section 7. Engineering was controlled chaos. Geordi LaForge stood at a workbench surrounded by modified equipment, making final adjustments to 2 environment suits that looked like they belonged in a science fiction story even by 24th century standards. Subspace field generators had been integrated into the suit fabric, creating a web of glowing circuitry across the chest and limbs. Emergency transport enhancers pulsed at the shoulders, synchronized with the Enterprise's transporter system. Strange and Data emerged from the turbolift, and Geordi looked up, his visor tracking their approach. "These suits should provide protection from dimensional friction for approximately 45 minutes, Geordi said, helping Data into the first suit. "After that, the subspace fields will destabilize and you'll be exposed to the raw energies of the rift." He paused. "Data, if your positronic matrix starts showing signs of cascade failure, hit the emergency transport. Don't wait." "Understood, Geordi." Data's golden eyes met his friend's visor. "However, I calculate the probability of successful mission completion is higher if I remain inside the rift until all fracture points are sealed, regardless of personal risk." "That's what I was afraid you'd say." Geordi turned to Strange, helping him into the second suit. "Doctor, I've also integrated a subspace communicator into your suit. It should allow you to maintain contact with the ship even inside the rift, though there'll probably be interference. Strange tested the suit's mobility, his hands moving through several mystical gestures. The golden light of his magic flickered, but held stable. The suit's subspace field is actually amplifying my abilities. It's giving me a stable framework to draw power from. Good work, Commander. Just come back alive so I can study how you do what you do. Geordi managed a smile, though his concern was evident. Both of you. The comm chimed. Bridge to engineering. The incursion is moving toward the rift. Dr. Strange, if it gets back inside, we may lose our chance to seal it. Strange's expression hardened. We're ready. Energize. The transporter beam took them, and for a moment, everything was light and dissolution. Then reality reassembled itself, and Strange and Data materialized on a small transport platform that Geordi had beamed into space just outside the rift's event horizon. The sight before them defied description. The rift was a wound in the fabric of existence itself, a tear that showed not darkness, but infinite possibility. Through it, they could see layers of reality stacked like sheets of glass, each one showing a different universe. In some, the stars were different colors. In others, physics worked by completely alien rules. In one particularly disturbing glimpse, Strange saw a universe where time flowed backward and entropy decreased instead of increased. Fascinating, Data said, his sensors recording everything. I am detecting quantum states that should not be possible. Matter that exists in superposition across multiple realities simultaneously. Welcome to the space between universes, Strange said. His hands were already moving, creating geometric patterns of golden light that formed a shield around their transport platform. Data, we need to reach the first fracture point. According to my calculations, it should be approximately 200 meters inside the rift at coordinates. He rattled off numbers that made no sense in three-dimensional space. Data's positronic brain processed the impossible coordinates. I can triangulate the location using subspace geometry. However, we have no means of propulsion. Strange smiled grimly. We have magic. He raised both hands, and a disk of golden light formed beneath their feet. Geometric patterns spiraled across its surface, and with a gesture, Strange sent the disk floating forward into the rift. The moment they crossed the threshold, reality went mad. Colors that had no names assaulted their senses. Sounds that existed in dimensions beyond normal hearing created harmonics that made Data's audio processors distort. The very concept of up and down became negotiable, with gravity pulling in multiple directions at once. Strange's face contorted with effort as he maintained their protective shields and navigated through the chaos. The dimensional friction is worse than I expected. Data, how are your systems holding up? I am experiencing significant sensory distortion, Data replied, his voice unnaturally calm given the circumstances. However, my positronic matrix remains stable, adjusting my perception filters to compensate for multidimensional input. They moved deeper into the rift, and the universe around them fragmented further. To their left, they saw a version of the Enterprise where the crew were all Vulcans. To their right, a Romulan empire that had made peace with the Federation centuries ago. Above, or what passed for above in this twisted space, a reality where Earth had never developed warp drive and remained isolated in its own solar system. First fracture point ahead, Strange announced. Through the chaos, they could see it, a point where multiple realities converged, creating a knot of dimensional instability. It looked like a tumor in the fabric of space, pulsing with sickly light. Strange extended his hands, and geometric patterns flowed from his fingers toward the fracture point. The patterns wrapped around the knot, tightening, pulling the separated realities back into their proper alignment. I'm stitching the dimensional boundaries back together, Strange explained, sweat beading on his forehead. Like repairing torn fabric. But the fabric is reality itself, and the needle is pure willpower. Data watched with his sensors at maximum, recording every detail. Your technique appears to be manipulating the quantum foam at the Planck scale, creating localized stability fields that force the dimensional boundaries to re-establish their natural separation. That's one way to describe it. Strange's hands moved in increasingly complex patterns. Another way is to say, I'm convincing reality that it wants to be separate again. Magic is as much about persuasion as force. The fracture point resisted, reality fighting against being constrained. Strange pushed harder, golden light flaring so brightly that Data had to dim his optical sensors. Then, with an audible snap that echoed across dimensions, the fracture sealed. 1 down, 16 to go. Enterprise to away team, came Geordi's voice through the subspace communicator, heavily distorted. We're reading successful closure of Fracture Point Alpha. Good work. But the incursion is trying to enter the rift. Captain Picard is attempting to distract it. Strange and Data exchange glances. Understood. Moving to Fracture Point Beta. They navigated through the dimensional chaos, the golden disk carrying them past realities that became increasingly strange. In one, they saw a universe made entirely of energy with no matter. In another, consciousness itself was a physical force that shaped reality through pure thought. Dr. Strange, Data said as they traveled, I have been calculating probabilities. Given the complexity of each seal and the time required, we will not complete this mission within the 45-minute protection window the suits provide. I know, Strange's voice was tight, but we don't have a choice. We keep going until the job is done or we die trying. They reached the second fracture point, and Strange began the sealing process again. But this one was worse, larger, more unstable, with tendrils of dimensional energy lashing out like living things. Strange had to dodge and weave his golden shields, blocking the tendrils while simultaneously working to seal the fracture. Data moved to help, extending his own hands. Dr. Strange, I do not possess your mystical abilities, but I am capable of precise energy manipulation. If you can show me the pattern. Strange looked at the android in surprise, then nodded. Watch carefully. The pattern has to be exact, or the seal won't hold. He demonstrated once, his hands moving through the intricate sequence. Data's positronic brain recorded every movement, every angle, every subtle variation in the energy flow. Then, without hesitation, Data replicated the gesture. Nothing happened at first. Then, faintly, a shimmer of energy appeared around Data's hands, not golden like Strange's magic, but a pale blue that matched the android's optical sensors. Impossible, Strange breathed. You're actually channeling mystical energy. But you're not even alive in the traditional sense. Perhaps magic, like consciousness, does not require biological life, Data suggested. Perhaps it simply requires will and understanding, both of which I possess. Together, they worked on the second fracture point. Strange's golden light and Data's pale blue energy intertwined, creating patterns that sealed the dimensional tear. It took longer than the first, but eventually it too snapped closed. 2 down, 15 to go. But time was running out. The suit's subspace field generators were already showing signs of strain, and Strange could feel the dimensional friction beginning to affect him. His hands trembled more violently, and blood trickled from his nose again. Enterprise to away team, Geordi's voice crackled through heavy interference. The incursion has breached the ship's shields. Hull integrity down to 73%. Captain says to hurry. Working on it, Strange replied through gritted teeth. They moved to the third fracture point, but as they approached, something changed. The rift itself seemed to pulse, and suddenly they were surrounded by copies of themselves, versions from other realities. A Strange who had given in to dark magic, his eyes glowing red. A Data whose positronic brain had achieved emotions through suffering, his face twisted with rage. A Strange who had never been in the car accident, still a surgeon, somehow pulled into this dimensional chaos. A Data who had become more than android, transcending into pure energy. Temporal and dimensional echoes, Strange said, raising his shields. Ignore them. They're not real, just reflections from adjacent realities bleeding through. But the echoes didn't ignore them. Dark Strange raised his hands, and crimson energy lashed out. Data's enraged counterpart lunged with inhuman speed. The other versions attacked, seeing Strange and Data as threats to their own realities. Correction, Data said, moving into a combat stance. They appeared to be quite real. Strange's hands wove defensive patterns while simultaneously trying to reach the third fracture point. Data, I need you to hold them off while I seal this one. Can you do that? Data's response was to meet his enraged counterpart head-on. His android strength matched against his own. I will endeavor to keep them occupied. The battle was chaos, Strange fighting Dark Strange in a duel of mystical energy. Golden light clashing against crimson darkness. Data fought his own darker reflections, precision and logic versus rage and transcendence. Around them, the rift pulsed and twisted, reality itself seeming to take sides in the conflict. Strange reached the third fracture point and began working, but fighting and sealing simultaneously pushed him to his absolute limit. His hands moved through patterns while dodging attacks. His concentration split between defense and repair. This universe's version of me, Dark Strange said, his voice dripping with contempt, still believes in restraint, in limits. I learned the truth. Power is the only thing that matters. Give in, and you could seal all these fractures with a thought. And become you? Strange deflected a crimson bolt. I've walked that path before, seen where it leads. The answer is no. Then you'll die here, and your precious realities will collapse anyway. Strange smiled grimly. Probably. But that's never stopped me before. With a final surge of willpower, Strange completed the seal on the third fracture point. It snapped closed, and the echo versions began to fade, reality reasserting itself now that the local instability was reduced. Dark Strange's last words echoed as he dissolved. You can't save them all. 3 down. 14 to go. And Strange's suit was reading 30 minutes of protection remaining. The Enterprise shuddered violently as another of the incursion's impossible tendrils struck the deflector shields. On the bridge, Picard gripped his command chair, while Worf cycled through every defensive configuration in the ship's tactical database. Shields at 42%, Worf reported. The entity is draining our power reserves. At current rate, shield collapse in 8 minutes. Divert auxiliary power to shields, Picard ordered, and maintain evasive pattern Beta 7. On the view screen, the incursion had grown even larger, fed by the energy it consumed from the Enterprise and the remaining Romulan warbuds. Its form pulsed and writhed, geometry shifting through dimensions that human minds weren't meant to perceive. Captain, came Commander Sila's voice over an open channel. My remaining ships are falling back. We cannot damage this thing, and it's destroying us ship by ship. I'm ordering a full retreat. Commander, if you retreat now, there will be nowhere to retreat to, Picard said urgently. That rift will consume this entire sector within the hour. We need to buy Strange and Data more time. There was a long pause. Then, very well, Picard. But if we survive this, the Romulan Empire will expect compensation for our losses. We'll discuss politics after we save reality itself. Deep inside the dimensional rift, Strange and Data were moving through the fourth fracture point when Strange communicator crackled to life. Enterprise to away team. Geordi's voice was barely audible through the interference. Suit integrity down to 60%. You've got maybe 20 minutes before the subspace fields fail completely. Strange sealed the fourth fracture point with a savage gesture, his exhaustion evident in every movement. Acknowledged. We're moving as fast as we can. Data sensors swept through the chaotic dimensional space, plotting a course to the fifth fracture point. Dr. Strange, I have analyzed our rate of progress. At current speed, we will require 47 minutes to seal all remaining fractures. We do not have sufficient time. Then we'll have to work faster. Strange created another golden disk, and they moved through the rift toward the next target. Or find another way. Another way? Strange's mind was racing, calculating probabilities and possibilities, even as he navigated through realities that folded in on themselves like cosmic origami. Each fracture point is a connection between universes. But they're all connected to this central rift, the nexus. What if instead of sealing each one individually, we could seal the nexus itself? Cut off the source. Data's positronic brain processed the idea in milliseconds. Theoretically sound. However, sealing the nexus would require exponentially more power than sealing individual fractures. The energy expenditure would likely be fatal. Probably. Strange's expression was grim, but it would work. And if I'm going to die, I'd rather die saving 2 universes than failing to save either one. I object to this plan, Data said. There must be an alternative that does not require your death. I'm open to suggestions, Commander. Before Data could respond, the space around them rippled. Not with dimensional instability, but with something else, a presence. They felt it before they saw it. Ancient, vast, and carrying power that made strange mystical senses scream warnings. A figure materialized before them, standing on nothing, unaffected by the dimensional chaos. It was humanoid, but its features kept shifting, one moment appearing as an elderly human woman, the next as a Vulcan male, then as species neither of them recognized. The only constant was its eyes, which glowed with the light of dying stars. Fascinating specimen, the being said, its voice echoing from multiple realities at once. A sorcerer displaced from his home universe, and an artificial life form achieving the impossible. Neither of you should be able to survive here, yet here you are. Strange's hands moved to defensive positions. Who are you? I am the architect. The being's form settled on that of a tall, slender figure draped in robes that seemed woven from the fabric of space-time itself. I am the one who created the breach that brought you here, Dr. Strange. I am the one who has been testing the barriers between universes. And I am the one who will soon unite all realities into a single, perfect cosmos. Data's optical sensors focused on the being. You are responsible for the dimensional instabilities. For what purpose? The architect laughed, and the sound made fracture points pulse in sympathy. Purpose? To correct a cosmic mistake. The multiverse is chaos, infinite realities, each one slightly different, each one wasting energy on variations that serve no purpose. One universe where humans never left Earth. Another where they conquered the galaxy. A third where they destroyed themselves in nuclear fire. Endless repetition, endless waste. The being gestured, and through the dimensional chaos, they saw images, thousands of universes, each one unique, each one beautiful in its diversity. I will unify them all, the architect continued. Collapse the barriers, merge the realities, create a single perfect universe that incorporates the best elements of each. No more waste. No more chaos. Just order. Just perfection. I know, Strange's voice was tight, but we don't have a choice. We keep going until the job is done, or we die trying. They reached the second fracture point, and Strange began the sealing process again. But this one was worse, larger, more unstable, with tendrils of dimensional energy lashing out like living things. Strange had to dodge and weave his golden shields, blocking the tendrils, while simultaneously working to seal the fracture. Data moved to help, extending his own hands. Dr. Strange, I do not possess your mystical abilities, but I am capable of precise energy manipulation. If you can show me the pattern. Strange looked at the android in surprise, then nodded. Watch carefully. The pattern has to be exact, or the seal won't hold. He demonstrated once, his hands moving through the intricate sequence. Data's positronic brain recorded every movement, every angle, every subtle variation in the energy flow. Then, without hesitation, Data replicated the gesture. Nothing happened at first. Then, faintly, a shimmer of energy appeared around Data's hands, not golden like Strange's magic, but a pale blue that matched the android's optical sensors. Impossible, Strange breathed. You're actually channeling mystical energy. But you're not even alive in the traditional sense. Perhaps magic, like consciousness, does not require biological life, Data suggested. Perhaps it simply requires will and understanding, both of which I possess. Together, they worked on the second fracture point. Strange golden light and Data's pale blue energy intertwined, creating patterns that sealed the dimensional tear. It took longer than the first, but eventually it too snapped closed. 2 down. 15 to go. But time was running out. The suit's subspace field generators were already showing signs of strain, and Strange could feel the dimensional friction beginning to affect him. His hands trembled more violently, and blood trickled from his nose again. Enterprise to away team. Geordi's voice crackled through heavy interference. The incursion has breached the ship's shields. Hull integrity down to 73%. Captain says to hurry. Working on it, Strange replied through gritted teeth. They moved to the third fracture point, but as they approached, something changed. The rift itself seemed to pulse, and suddenly they were surrounded by copies of themselves, versions from other realities. A Strange who had given in to dark magic, his eyes glowing red. A Data whose positronic brain had achieved emotions through suffering, his face twisted with rage. A Strange who had never been in the car accident, still a surgeon, somehow pulled into this dimensional chaos. A Data who had become more than android, transcending into pure energy. Temporal and dimensional echoes, Strange said, raising his shields. Ignore them. They're not real, just reflections from adjacent realities bleeding through. But the echoes didn't ignore them. Dark Strange raised his hands, and crimson energy lashed out. Data's enraged counterpart lunged with inhuman speed. The other versions attacked, seeing Strange and Data as threats to their own realities. Correction, Data said, moving into a combat stance. They appeared to be quite real. Strange's hands wove defensive patterns while simultaneously trying to reach the third fracture point. Data, I need you to hold them off while I seal this one. Can you do that? Data's response was to meet his enraged counterpart head-on, his android strength matched against his own. I will endeavor to keep them occupied. The battle was chaos, Strange fighting Dark Strange in a duel of mystical energy, golden light clashing against crimson darkness. Data fought his own darker reflections, precision and logic versus rage and transcendence. Around them, the rift pulsed and twisted, reality itself seeming to take sides in the conflict. Strange reached the third fracture point and began working, but fighting and sealing simultaneously pushed him to his absolute limit. His hands moved through patterns while dodging attacks, his concentration split between defense and repair. This universe's version of me, Dark Strange said, his voice dripping with contempt, still believes in restraint, in limits. I learned the truth. Power is the only thing that matters. Give in, and you could seal all these fractures with a thought. And become you? Strange deflected a crimson bolt. I've walked that path before, seen where it leads. The answer is no. Then you'll die here, and your precious realities will collapse anyway. Strange smiled grimly. Probably. But that's never stopped me before. With a final surge of willpower, Strange completed the seal on the third fracture point. It snapped closed, and the echo versions began to fade, reality reasserting itself now that the local instability was reduced. Dark Strange's last words echoed as he dissolved. You can't save them all. 3 down. 14 to go. And Strange's suit was reading 30 minutes of protection remaining. The Nexus was a singularity of infinite possibility, a point where all 17 fracture points converged into a blazing sphere of dimensional chaos. Reality didn't just bend here, it broke, shattered, reformed, and broke again in an endless cycle. Strange and Data stood before it, two impossibly small figures facing the heart of a cosmic wound. This is it, Strange said, his voice barely audible over the roar of collapsing dimensions. The focal point of the entire rift. Seal this, and every fracture point seals simultaneously. Data sensors were going haywire, trying to process readings that violated every law of physics he'd been programmed to understand. Dr. Strange, the energy required to seal a convergence of this magnitude would be equivalent to the total power output of a star over its entire lifetime. Even combined, we do not possess such power. We don't need to possess it. Strange's hands began moving through preparatory gestures, golden light flickering weakly around his fingers. We just need to redirect it. The Nexus itself is generating massive amounts of dimensional friction, energy bleeding between universes. If we can create a feedback loop, use that energy against itself. You intend to collapse the rift using its own power. Data's positronic brain processed the concept in microseconds. Elegant and catastrophically dangerous. Every great spell is. Strange closed his eyes, centering himself the way the Ancient One had taught him years ago. He felt the dimensional energies swirling around them, felt the barriers between universes screaming under the strain. And beneath it all, he felt something else, the faint presence of Wong and the other sorcerers from his universe, beginning their dimensional anchor spell. It was like feeling a lifeline thrown across an infinite void. Data, I need you to mirror my movements exactly, Strange said. Every gesture, every pattern. Your energy and mine need to harmonize perfectly, or this won't work. Understood. Data positioned himself beside Strange, his hands ready. Strange's communicator crackled. Enterprise two-way team. Shields at 15%. The incursion is. The signal dissolved into static. Now or never, Strange muttered. His hands began moving. The spell was the most complex thing he'd ever attempted. In his own universe, with full access to his powers and the mystical energies of Earth, it would have been nearly impossible. Here, weakened and working through a damaged sling ring, it should have been suicide. But Strange had bargained with Dormammu in a time loop. He'd wielded the Time Stone and seen the 14 million possible futures. He'd died and returned, learned that death was just another barrier to overcome. This was just one more impossible thing. Golden light spiraled from his hands, forming geometric patterns that existed in more dimensions than 3. The mandalas rotated, each one a mathematical formula made manifest, each one a piece of a larger puzzle. Data watched and mirrored, his own pale blue energy intertwining with strange gold. The Nexus responded. The sphere of dimensional chaos pulsed, drawn to their working like a moth to flame. Energy began flowing from the rift into their spell, and Strange felt the feedback loop starting to form. It's working, he gasped. Keep going. Don't break the pattern. But something was fighting them. The Architect's influence, still present in the rift structure, resisted their efforts. Strange felt pressure building in his mind, the entity trying to disrupt his concentration, to break the spell before it could complete. You cannot win, the Architect's voice echoed through dimensions. I have worked for eons to weaken these barriers. Your feeble magic cannot undo my design. Strange's response was to push harder. His hands moved faster, the patterns growing more complex. Blood ran freely from his nose now, and his vision was starting to blur. The subspace field in his suit was failing, dimensional friction beginning to tear at his body. Data systems were faring better, but even his positronic matrix was showing signs of strain. Dr. Strange, the energy flow is becoming unstable. If we lose control, the feedback loop will reverse and destroy us. Then we don't lose control. Outside the rift, the Enterprise was dying. Shields were at 7%. Hull breaches on decks 12, 15, and 17. The incursion had wrapped its impossible tendrils around the ship like a cosmic spider, draining power and existence simultaneously. Picard stood on the bridge, his uniform torn, a cut above his eye bleeding freely. All hands abandon ship. Evacuation protocols Alpha. Get to the escape pods. Captain, we can't leave Strange and Data, Riker protested. We won't be helping them if we're all dead, number one. Picard's voice carried the weight of a captain making the hardest decision. Evacuate the ship. That's an order. On the remaining Romulan warbird, Commander Sela watched the Enterprise dying. For a moment, she considered simply leaving, retreating to Romulan space, and letting the Federation ship perish. But something stopped her. Perhaps it was the sheer audacity of what Picard and his crew were attempting. Perhaps it was the knowledge that if they failed, the Romulan Empire would fall too. Target the incursion, she ordered. All weapons. I know it won't kill the thing, but maybe we can distract it long enough for Picard's people to evacuate. Commander, our shields are at 18%. One more hit, and... I gave you an order. The Romulan warbird opened fire, disruptors blazing. The incursion turned its attention away from the Enterprise, focusing on this new threat. Sela smiled grimly as her ship shuddered under the entity's counterattack. For the Empire, she said quietly. Inside the rift, Strange felt the moment the Enterprise's shields failed. He felt Sela's ship taking the punishment meant for Picard's crew. He felt the incursion growing stronger, fed by the energy weapons striking it. And he felt rage. No more, Strange said, his voice carrying power that made Data's optical sensors flare. I have lost too much, fought too hard, died too many times to let some cosmic architect play God with existence itself. His hands moved in a blur, no longer following any spell he'd learned, but improvising, combining techniques from the Ancient One, from the Vishanti, from dark grimoires he'd studied but never dared to use. He was pulling power from everywhere, from the rift, from subspace, from the quantum foam, from his own life force. Data watched in awe as Strange's body began to glow, golden light blazing from within like a star being born. Dr. Strange, your life signs. I know. Strange's voice echoed across dimensions. Data, give me everything you have. All your power, all your processing capacity. Trust me. Data didn't hesitate. He opened every circuit, every pathway in his positronic brain, channeling everything through his hands and into the spell. His pale blue energy merged completely with strange gold, creating something new, a fusion of magic and machine, biology and technology, mysticism and logic. The feedback loop completed. The Nexus convulsed as its own energy was turned against it. The 17 fracture points began collapsing simultaneously, reality reasserting itself, the barriers between universes strengthening. Strange and Data stood at the center of a cosmic maelstrom, holding the spell together through sheer willpower. The architect appeared one last time, its form flickering and unstable. This isn't over, sorcerer. You may seal this rift, but I exist beyond any single universe. I will try again, and again, until I succeed. Strange met the entity's gaze. Then I'll stop you again, and again. That's what I do. I'm the Sorcerer Supreme, and protecting reality is my job. It doesn't matter which reality. It doesn't matter what universe. As long as I exist, entities like you will never succeed. Bold words from a man about to die. Strange smiled, and it was the smile of someone who had already accepted his fate. I've died before. Dormammu taught me that death is just another obstacle. If I have to die to save two universes, then that's a trade I'll make gladly. With a final surge of power, Strange and Data completed the seal. The Nexus collapsed. The 17 fracture points snapped closed simultaneously. The dimensional rift sealed itself, with a sound like reality exhaling in relief. And the incursion, suddenly cut off from its food source, began to dissolve, its impossible geometry unraveling, its many eyes closing one by one. Outside the now sealed rift, the Enterprise drifted in space, powerless but intact. On the Romulan warbird, Sela stared at her sensors in disbelief. The spatial tear is gone, her science officer reported. All dimensional readings have returned to normal. The entity is dissipating. On the Enterprise bridge, Geordi's hands flew across his console. Captain, I'm detecting 2 life signs materializing outside the ship. It's Strange and Data. Beam them directly to sickbay, Picard ordered, then slumped in his chair, exhaustion finally catching up with him. And somebody tell me we actually survived this. In sickbay, 2 figures materialized on biobeds. Data appeared relatively intact, though his golden eyes were dim and his movements sluggish, his positronic matrix recovering from massive overload. Dr. Crusher was immediately at his side, scanning him with her medical tricorder, while simultaneously calling for an engineering team. Strange was worse, much worse. His body was barely holding together, flesh phasing in and out of dimensional stability. His breathing was shallow, his heartbeat erratic. The dimensional friction had torn at him on a cellular level, and the massive expenditure of mystical energy had pushed him far beyond any reasonable limit. Beverly worked frantically, but her medical knowledge was useless here. Nothing in her training had prepared her for someone whose molecules were oscillating between dimensions. "I need Strange to stabilize himself," she said urgently. "His mystical abilities are the only thing that can heal damage like this." Data forced himself to sit up, fighting through the sluggish response of his systems. "Dr. Strange, you must focus. Use your magic to stabilize your dimensional phase variance." Strange's eyes fluttered open, gray, tired, but still aware. His hands twitched, trying to form mystical gestures, but his control was gone. Golden light sparked and died around his fingers. "Can't," he whispered. "Used everything. Nothing left." "That is unacceptable," Data said firmly. "You stated that you have died before and returned. Do so again." "Doesn't work like that." Picard entered sickbay, still bleeding from the cut above his eye, but walking under his own power. He moved to Strange's bedside and looked down at the man who had saved them all. "Dr. Strange," Picard said quietly, "you told me that magic is about willpower and knowledge. You have both in abundance. You've beaten impossible odds before. This is just one more obstacle." Strange's lips quirked in a ghost of a smile. "Inspirational speech. Nice try, Captain." "It's not just a speech. It's an observation." Picard leaned closer. "In my universe we have a saying. It is possible to commit no mistakes and still lose. That is not weakness. That is life. But the corollary is also true. Sometimes you can be broken, depleted, at the absolute end of your resources, and still find a way to win. Because that's what we do. We find a way." Strange's eyes focused on Picard. "Find a way," he repeated softly. Then, with tremendous effort, he closed his eyes and reached inward, searching for any remaining reservoir of power. He found it in the most unexpected place: the pocket dimension, the small sphere he'd created to contain the dimensional parasite, which had been feeding on his power this entire time. He'd forgotten about it in the chaos of sealing the rift. But it was still there, still maintained by a tiny thread of his consciousness. And the parasite inside was full of dimensional energy. With the last of his strength, Strange released the pocket dimension. The parasite emerged, confused and weakened, its form unstable. Before it could attack, Strange's hands moved in one final gesture, not to banish it, but to absorb it. The dimensional energy flooded into him. Alien, chaotic, burning like acid, but energy nonetheless. Strange channeled it, refined it, used it to stabilize his own dimensional phase variance. His body stopped flickering, solidified, healed. The parasite screamed as it was consumed, then dissolved completely. Strange gasped and sat up, his body restored, but his eyes carrying new exhaustion. "That," he said hoarsely, "was deeply unpleasant. I do not recommend consuming dimensional parasites as a healing technique." Beverly stared at him in medical outrage. "You absorbed an entity that was trying to kill you to heal yourself? That's the most reckless thing I've ever seen." "You should meet my colleague, Tony Stark," Strange replied. "He makes me look cautious." He looked down at his hands, steady now, the tremor reduced to its normal baseline. "How's Data?" "Recovering," the android said from the adjacent bio bed. "My positronic matrix experienced a 97% system load during the final sealing. However, all primary systems are now functioning within normal parameters." He turned his head to look at Strange. "We succeeded." "We did." Strange managed a tired smile. "You know, Data, in my universe, we'd probably make you an honorary sorcerer after a stunt like that. You've got the temperament for it. Absolute focus, willingness to sacrifice, understanding that some things are worth dying for." "I am honored by the comparison." Picard cleared his throat. "Gentlemen, while I appreciate the mutual respect, we still have a situation. The architect is still out there. It promised to try again." Strange's expression sobered. "It will. Entities like that don't give up. But for now, the barriers between universes are sealed and reinforced. Wong and the other sorcerers from my reality performed the dimensional anchor spell. I could feel it during the final sealing. The architect won't be able to punch through easily. It'll take time for it to try again. Which brings us to another problem, Picard said. You're still trapped in our universe. How do we get you home? Strange had been dreading this question. I don't know if you can, Captain. The rift is sealed. My sling ring is destroyed. He held up the brass device, now nothing more than cracked metal, completely inert. And even if I could open a portal, doing so might weaken the barriers we just reinforced. So you're stuck here, Beverly said, in a universe where your magic barely works. Where my magic works differently, Strange corrected. I've adapted, learned to channel power through subspace instead of dimensional energy. It's not perfect, but it's functional. He looked at Picard. If I'm going to be stranded here, Captain, I'd like to make myself useful. This universe has plenty of threats that could use someone with my skill set. Are you asking to join Starfleet? Strange laughed, then winced. I don't think I'd do well with the chain of command. No offense, but I'm used to operating independently. But if you need a consultant on dimensional phenomena, mystical threats, or cosmic-level weirdness, he shrugged. I'm available. Before Picard could respond, the comm chimed. Bridge to Captain Picard. We're being hailed by the Romulan vessel. On screen, Commander Sela's face appeared, her bridge clearly damaged, but her crew still functioning. Her expression was carefully neutral. Captain Picard. Dr. Strange. I acknowledge the debt the Romulan Star Empire owes you both. Your actions saved not just the Federation, but all of known space. Picard raised an eyebrow. That must have been difficult to say. You have no idea, Sela replied dryly. Consider our territorial dispute in this sector postponed. The Romulan Senate will want a full report on what transpired here, and they will want assurances that this architect entity won't threaten us again. Then we share a common goal, Commander, Picard said. Perhaps this crisis could be the beginning of a new understanding between our peoples. Sela's expression showed what she thought of that idea, but she nodded. Perhaps. We shall see. Sela out. The screen went dark. Strange looked at Picard with newfound respect. You just turned a cosmic catastrophe into a diplomatic opportunity. Impressive. In my experience, Doctor, the greatest victories come not from defeating enemies, but from making allies. Picard smiled. You saved 2 universes today. The least we can do is give you a place in this one. Strange settled back on the bio-bed, exhaustion finally overtaking adrenaline. Thank you, Captain. Though I should warn you, in my universe, I attract trouble. Dimensional beings, dark gods, mystical catastrophes. If the architect targets me again, then we'll face it together, Picard said firmly. Welcome to the 24th century, Dr. Strange. I suspect your stay will be anything but boring. Hashtag Section 10. 3 days had passed since the sealing of the dimensional rift. The Enterprise maintained orbit around a Federation starbase, while repair crews worked to restore the damage from the incursion's attack. In that time, Strange had become something of a curiosity among the crew, the man from another universe who had helped save their reality. He stood now in 10 forward, the ship's lounge, staring out at the stars. They were the same stars he'd seen from his Earth, yet fundamentally different. Same constellations, different histories. It was a reminder that he was truly far from home. Penny for your thoughts? Guinan said, appearing beside him with 2 drinks. The enigmatic bartender had an otherworldly quality that Strange's mystical senses immediately recognized. She wasn't human, though she appeared to be. And there was something about her that suggested she'd seen more than most beings could imagine. Wrong universe for pennies, Strange replied, accepting the drink. But the sentiment is appreciated. Guinan smiled. I've met a lot of unusual people in my time, Dr. Strange. But you're the first one from an entirely different universal structure. That must be disorienting. That's one word for it. Strange sipped the drink, some kind of fruit juice, surprisingly good. I spent years learning to navigate the mystical landscape of my Earth. Every ley line, every dimensional weak point, every cosmic entity that might threaten our reality. Here, I'm starting from scratch. New rules, new threats, new limitations. New opportunities, Guinan countered. Your universe has magic. This one has the Federation, worlds working together in peace, exploring the unknown. That's its own kind of magic. Strange considered this. You're right. In my universe, Earth is constantly under threat from aliens, enhanced individuals, dark gods. We've never achieved anything close to your Federation. The idea of hundreds of worlds cooperating, exploring peacefully. He shook his head in wonder. That's something worth protecting. Data entered 10 forward, moving with his characteristic precision. Since the mission inside the rift, the android had been different, more contemplative, as if his brief ability to channel mystical energy had changed something fundamental in his programming. Dr. Strange, Data said, approaching them. I have been analyzing the energy patterns we generated during the sealing of the rift. I believe I may have developed a technique to replicate the effect, albeit on a much smaller scale. Strange's eyebrows rose. You're saying you can still use magic? In a manner of speaking. Data held up his hand, and with visible concentration, a faint shimmer of blue energy appeared around his fingers. It was weak, unstable, lasting only a few seconds before dissipating. But it was there. I cannot explain the mechanism through conventional science. It appears that exposure to your mystical techniques has created new pathways in my positronic matrix. Pathways that allow me to manipulate quantum states through focused will. The first android sorcerer, Strange said, genuine amazement in his voice. Data. Do you understand how unprecedented this is? In my universe, magic requires either biological systems that can channel dimensional energies or artifacts specifically designed for that purpose. You're neither, yet you found a way. Perhaps, Guinan said thoughtfully, magic isn't about biology or artifacts. Perhaps it's about consciousness and will, and Data has both. Data's head tilted. An intriguing hypothesis. Though I must note that my abilities are extremely limited compared to yours, Dr. Strange. I suspect it would take years, perhaps decades, to develop them to a useful level. Then we have time, Strange said. If I'm stuck here, I'll need something to do. Teaching you the basics of mystical theory could be interesting. Though I should warn you, most sorcerers go through years of training that involves a lot of meditation and self-discipline. I am capable of maintaining inactive states for extended periods, Data replied seriously. And I possess perfect discipline, as I cannot be distracted by biological needs or emotional impulses. Strange laughed. You might actually be the perfect student. The door to 10 forward opened, and Geordi entered with a PADD in hand. Dr. Strange, you need to see this. I've been analyzing the subspace readings from when you opened that portal to contact your universe. And I think I might have found something. They moved to a table where Geordi spread out his data. Complex equations and energy patterns filled the display, showing the moment when Strange had breached the dimensional barriers. Look here, Geordi said, pointing to a specific section. When you opened the portal, it created a subspace resonance pattern that lasted for about 3 seconds after you closed it. That pattern is still technically active. It's just too faint for our normal sensors to detect. Strange leaned forward, his mystical senses analyzing the data in ways the others couldn't. A dimensional echo, a thread connecting this universe to mine. Exactly. And if we could amplify that thread, strengthen it. Geordi's enthusiasm was evident. We might be able to open a stable portal. Send you home. For a long moment, Strange said nothing. He stared at the data, his mind racing through possibilities. Going home, returning to his Earth, his sanctum, his responsibilities as Sorcerer Supreme. Seeing Wong again, resuming his duties as protector of his reality. But something made him hesitate. The architect is still out there, he said finally. It knows about me now, knows I can seal its breaches between universes. If I go home, what's to stop it from targeting this universe again? You don't have sorcerers here. No one trained to detect dimensional threats or seal mystical breaches. "We have the Enterprise," Picard said, entering the lounge with Riker beside him. "And we have the data you and Commander Data collected. We're not helpless, Doctor." "No, you're not." Strange straightened. "But the Architect is patient. It works on cosmic timescales. It'll wait until I'm gone, until everyone's forgotten about dimensional threats. And then it'll try again, and this universe won't have anyone who understands what's happening until it's too late." "So you're saying you want to stay?" Riker asked. Strange looked out at the stars again. "I'm saying I have a choice to make. My universe has other protectors. Wong, the other sorcerers, the Avengers. They can manage without me, at least for a while. But this universe..." He turned back to face them. "This universe has something mine doesn't. Hope. Unity. The genuine belief that different species, different cultures, can work together for the common good. That's rare even across the multiverse. And the Architect wants to destroy that by merging all realities into one," Data observed. "Exactly." Strange's expression hardened. "I can't let that happen. Not when I'm the only one who understands the threat." Guinan smiled knowingly. "Sounds like you've already made your decision." "I have." Strange looked at Picard. "Captain, I'd like to formally request permission to remain aboard the Enterprise as a civilian consultant on dimensional phenomena and mystical threats. I won't join Starfleet. I work better independently, but I'll be available for missions that require my expertise." Picard studied him carefully. "You'd be giving up your home, your responsibilities in your own universe, to protect ours. That's a significant sacrifice. I've made sacrifices before. This one actually feels right." Strange glanced at Data. "Besides, someone needs to teach the universe's first android sorcerer. Can't do that if I'm in a different reality." Data's approximation of a smile appeared. "I would be honored to continue studying under your guidance." "There's another consideration," Geordi said, still looking at his PADD. "If we leave that dimensional resonance active, don't try to amplify it into a full portal. It could serve as an early warning system. If the Architect or any other entity tries to breach the barriers between universes again, we detect it through fluctuations in the resonance pattern." "A mystical alarm system," Strange said approvingly. "Using the connection to my universe as a sensor." "That's clever, Commander. Very clever." Picard made his decision. "Very well, Dr. Strange. I'll file the appropriate paperwork with Starfleet Command. You'll have quarters aboard the Enterprise and full access to our resources. In return, we expect your full cooperation in matters involving dimensional security." "You have it." Strange extended his hand, and Picard shook it firmly. "Welcome to the crew, Doctor." Unofficially. Over the following hours, the reality of Strange's decision settled in. He moved his few possessions, mainly his damaged sling ring and the clothes he'd arrived in, to quarters on Deck 8. Beverly Crusher ran one final medical scan, confirming that his cellular structure had fully stabilized in this universe's physical laws. Geordi set up monitoring equipment to track the dimensional resonance pattern, creating the early warning system they discussed. And Strange began the slow process of adapting to his new reality. That evening, he found himself in stellar cartography again, studying the local sector. Data joined him, carrying several pads containing mystical theory texts that Strange had begun compiling, translating his knowledge of the mystic arts into something an android's positronic brain could process. "I have been considering something," Data said. "In your universe, you protect Earth from mystical threats. Here, aboard the Enterprise, you could protect hundreds of worlds. The scope of your responsibility has actually increased." That's one way to look at it. Strange created a small golden portal, just a demonstration, showing Data the hand movements involved. "Though I suspect the threats will be different. No Dormammu, no Vishanti, no Hell Dimensions. But this universe has its own dangers. Q, for instance. I suspect he and I will cross paths again. Q is unpredictable," Data admitted, "though generally not malicious, merely mischievous on a cosmic scale. In my universe, we have a saying about entities like question don't trust anyone who can rewrite reality on a whim, no matter how friendly they seem. Strange closed the portal, but we'll deal with him if necessary. The door opened and Picard entered. Dr. Strange, I thought you should know. Starfleet Command has approved your presence aboard the Enterprise. Though they want a full briefing on dimensional theory and the threat posed by the architect. I can provide that. Though fair warning, most of what I know about dimensional mechanics would sound like mysticism to your scientists. They'll have trouble translating it into their framework. Then we'll bridge that gap together. Picard moved to stand beside them, looking at the star charts. You know, in a way, this situation reminds me of the Federation's founding principle. Infinite diversity in infinite combinations. Different worlds, different species, working together. Now, we have different universes doing the same. Strange smiled. I like that philosophy. It's not that different from what the Ancient One taught me. That reality is diverse, chaotic, and beautiful precisely because of that diversity. The architect wants to eliminate that. Create one perfect reality. But perfection is sterile. Growth requires diversity, chaos, the unexpected. Spoken like someone who's spent years protecting that diversity, Picard observed. And I'll continue to do so, just in a different universe now. Strange looked at his hands, steadier than they'd been in years, the tremor reduced by his adaptation to this reality's physics. You know what's strange? Pun intended. I spent years in my universe fighting to protect it, watching friends die, making impossible choices. I became the Sorcerer Supreme, the guardian of the mystical realm. But I always felt isolated, separate from the people I was protecting because they couldn't understand the threats I faced. He gestured at the stars. Here, in your universe, you have an entire organization dedicated to exploring the unknown and facing impossible threats together. The Federation, Starfleet, ships like the Enterprise. You don't face the darkness alone. You do it as a team, as a civilization. He turned to Picard. That's something I never had. And maybe something I need. Data's head tilted. You are suggesting that being trapped in our universe is not entirely unwelcome. Maybe I'm not trapped, Strange said quietly. Maybe I'm exactly where I need to be. The comm chimed. Bridge to Captain Picard. We're receiving a transmission. It's unusual, sir. Define unusual, Lieutenant. It's coming from the subspace resonance pattern linking to Dr. Strange's universe. Someone from the other side is trying to make contact. Strange and Picard exchanged glances, then moved quickly to the bridge. The view screen showed static and interference, but a voice was coming through, distorted but recognizable. Stephen, can you hear me? It's Wong. Strange moved closer to the screen. Wong, how did you? We've been monitoring the dimensional anchor, spell we cast. It left a residual connection to your location. I've been trying to establish communication for the past 2 days. Wong's voice stabilized slightly. Are you all right? The mystical disturbances we detected were catastrophic. I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. I sealed the rift, stopped the architect, for now, and saved 2 universes. Just another Tuesday. That's remarkably blasé about preventing multiversal catastrophe. A pause. Are you coming home? Strange looked around the bridge, at Picard, at Data, at Worf and the other officers who had fought beside him. At this universe that valued exploration and unity and the infinite diversity of existence. Not yet, he said finally. The architect is still a threat, and this universe needs someone who understands dimensional security. I'm staying here as a consultant, teaching them how to defend against mystical threats. Stephen, your responsibilities as Sorcerer Supreme can be handled by you and the other sorcerers. Strange interrupted gently. Wong, you were my student. You're ready to be my successor. The Sanctum Sanctorum is in good hands. There was a long silence. Then, you're serious. You're actually staying in another universe. I am. But this connection, don't close it. Keep monitoring it from your end. If the architect tries again, or if this universe needs help from ours, We'll have a way to communicate. Understood. And Stephen? Be careful. We don't know what other threats exist in that reality. Neither do I. That's what makes it interesting. Strange smiled. May the Vishanti watch over you, Wong. And tell everyone at Kamar Taj that Strange sends his regards. They'll want to know when you're coming home. Tell them I am home. Just a different kind of home. The transmission ended. Strange stood looking at the blank view screen for a moment, then turned to find Picard watching him with understanding in his eyes. No regrets, the captain asked. None. Strange's voice was firm. I spent years protecting one world. Now I get to protect hundreds, maybe thousands. That's not a downgrade, that's an upgrade. Riker stepped forward. So what happens now? We just go back to exploring? Business as usual. Business as usual for the Enterprise, Strange said. For me, it's a new beginning. Learning this universe's threats, cataloging dimensional weak points, developing new spells adapted to your physics. He looked at Data. And teaching an android how to be a sorcerer. That alone could take years. I am a quick learner, Data said. You'd better be. Because if the architect returns, we'll need every advantage we can get. Picard moved to his command chair. Then let's get back to work. Helm, set course for Sector 374. There are 3 unexplored systems that require survey, and Starfleet wants us to investigate reports of unusual subspace readings near the Briar Patch. Unusual subspace readings? Strange asked. Is that code for something weird and possibly dangerous? In our experience, Worf said, it usually is. Strange laughed, a real laugh, free and unburdened. Then, I'm definitely in the right place. Weird and dangerous is my specialty. As the Enterprise turned away from the starbase and jumped to warp, Strange stood near the view screen, watching the stars streak past. In his old universe, he'd seen the multiverse, infinite realities, infinite possibilities. But he'd never imagined he'd end up permanently in one of them. And yet, here he was. Dr. Stephen Strange, master of the mystic arts, sorcerer supreme of one universe, now defender of another. It wasn't the path he'd expected. But then again, the best paths never were. Computer, he said quietly, create a personal log entry. Begin recording. The computer chirped acknowledgement. This is Dr. Stephen Strange, civilian consultant to the USS Enterprise, Stardate. He paused. Computer, what's the stardate? Stardate 47,988.1. Right. Stardate 47,988.1. It's been 3 days since I arrived in this universe, and I've decided to stay. Not because I'm trapped, though that was the initial situation, but because this universe needs someone who understands mystical and dimensional threats. And because... He paused, searching for words. Because in my universe, I protected Earth. Here, I can protect something larger. A federation of worlds working together, exploring, growing, learning. That's worth staying for. He looked out at the stars rushing past. The architect is still out there. It'll try again eventually. But when it does, this universe will be ready. Because I'll make sure of it. That's my oath, my responsibility, my purpose. I am Dr. Strange. And I protect reality. All of it. Even the parts one didn't know existed until 3 days ago. End log. The stars continued their dance across the view screen, and somewhere in the quantum foam, in the spaces between dimensions, the architect watched and waited. But for now, 2 universes were safe. And standing between them and the darkness was a sorcerer who had learned that home wasn't about geography or even reality itself. Home was about purpose. And Strange had found his. The dimensional rift that had threatened to collapse 2 universes was sealed, but the threat it represented would never truly vanish. The architect remained at large, an entity existing between all realities, patient and methodical in its plan to merge infinite universes into one perfect cosmos. But now it faced opposition it hadn't anticipated. A master of the mystic arts displaced from his home reality, armed with knowledge spanning 2 universes and the determination that came from protecting existence itself. Dr. Stephen Strange had become something unprecedented. a guardian operating across the dimensional divide. His presence aboard the Enterprise represented a bridge between mysticism and science, between the chaos of his universe and the ordered exploration of the Federation. In teaching Data the fundamentals of magical theory, he was creating something new, a synthesis of technology and sorcery that neither universe had achieved alone. For Captain Picard and his crew, Strange's arrival marked the beginning of a new era of exploration. They had encountered spatial anomalies and temporal distortions before, but never a threat that spanned multiple universes. Now they understood that reality itself was fragile, that barriers between worlds required protection, and that existence was far stranger than they had imagined. The dimensional resonance pattern linking Strange's home universe to the Star Trek reality remained active, a thread connecting two branches of creation, monitored constantly by both Geordi's sensors and Wong's mystical wards. If the architect tried again, they would know. If new threats emerged from the spaces between universes, they would be ready. Strange stood in his new quarters late that evening, using magic to arrange his few possessions. The damaged sling ring sat on a shelf, a reminder of what he'd lost and what he'd gained. His red cloak of levitation hung nearby, somehow having survived the dimensional crossing despite being torn and scorched. With a gesture, Strange channeled mystical energy into the fabric, repairing it through a combination of his magic and the subspace fields Geordi had taught him to manipulate. The cloak wrapped around his shoulders, responsive as always, a piece of home that had followed him across realities. Strange smiled, feeling the familiar weight, the comfortable presence of a mystical artifact that had fought beside him through countless battles. Tomorrow he would begin his work in earnest, cataloging this universe's mystical landscape, identifying potential dimensional weak points, teaching Data his first real lesson in sorcery. The Federation's records contained mentions of beings like Q, of spatial anomalies that defied physics, of ancient civilizations that had achieved near omnipotence. All of it needed investigation from a mystical perspective. But tonight, Stephen Strange simply stood at his window, watching the stars flow past at warp speed, and marveled at the path his life had taken. From neurosurgeon to sorcerer, from protector of one world to guardian of hundreds, from master of the mystic arts to what? He didn't have a title yet in this universe. Perhaps he didn't need one. What mattered was the work, the protection, the eternal vigilance against threats that existed beyond normal comprehension. In the quantum foam, in the spaces between dimensions, in the cracks where reality bent and folded, darkness waited. Entities like the architect plotted and schemed, seeking to impose their will on the chaos of existence. But standing against them now was a sorcerer who had crossed the barriers between universes, who had learned to blend magic with science, who had found new purpose in an unexpected place. The architect had made a critical error. It had pulled Dr. Strange into this universe, thinking to remove him from his native reality. Instead, it had given him access to new powers, new allies, and a new mission that spanned the breadth of creation itself. Two universes, two sets of threats, one guardian watching over them both. Let the architect try again. Next time, it would find Stephen Strange ready, armed with the knowledge of two realities and backed by the crew of the finest ship in Starfleet. The dimensional barriers were sealed. The rift was closed. And somewhere between the stars, a new legend was beginning. The legend of the sorcerer of Starfleet, the man from another universe who chose to stay and protect a reality not his own, because that's what sorcerers do. They stand between darkness and light. They protect the boundaries of existence. They give everything, even their chance to go home, to keep reality safe. That was Dr. Strange. In any universe,